The billionaire in a wheelchair was alone, until a single mom asked, "Will you dance with me?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The billionaire in a wheelchair was alone, until a single mom asked, "Will you dance with me?" It was a cold winter evening in the heart of New York City. Snowflakes drifted gently down, painting the streets in a blanket of white. The hum of distant traffic and the soft glow of streetlights filled the air as Jacob Carter, a young billionaire, sat alone in a dimly lit bar. The luxury of his penthouse, the fame, the power, none of it mattered tonight. He had it all, yet he felt more alone than ever. Jacob had built his empire from the ground up, but the wealth that surrounded him only served to highlight the emptiness inside. Tonight, as he sat in the corner, watching couples chat and laugh around him, the feeling of loneliness pressed down harder than the cold outside. He adjusted himself in his wheelchair, his eyes scanning the room. A quiet sigh escaped his lips. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him for who he truly was. Not just the man in the wheelchair, not just the millionaire with the endless resources. People saw him as a means to an end, or worse, as someone to be pitied. And then, just as he was about to settle into his thoughts, the door opened with a soft creak. A woman entered, brushing off the snow from her coat. She had the kind of presence that demanded attention without trying. She wasn't striking in a conventional sense, but there was something about her, a warmth, a kindness, that caught Jacob off guard. Her name was Jessica. She had worked all day at the local diner, juggling the needs of her young daughter and her job as a single mother. Tonight she was tired, exhausted really. But as she stepped inside the bar to escape the cold, she didn't expect what would happen next. Jessica scanned the room looking for a place to sit. She wasn't interested in a fancy night out, just somewhere warm, somewhere she could rest her weary feet. Her eyes landed on Jacob, sitting quietly by himself at the far end of the bar. He wasn't alone by choice, she could tell. There was something sad in the way he looked out the window, lost in thought. And then, as if some invisible force pushed her forward, she walked over to him. She didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess herself. She just approached him, her steps steady, her mind focused. "Hi," she said, offering a small smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but would you like to dance?" Jacob blinked, his gaze lifting to meet hers. He wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. A dance? With him? He stared for a moment, trying to process her words. He hadn't danced in years. Hell, he couldn't even remember the last time someone had asked him to do something so normal, something so human. And yet, there was something in her eyes, something pure and genuine. She wasn't asking because she saw his wealth or his status. She wasn't asking out of sympathy. She was just asking because, in that moment, she wanted to share a connection with him. "Are you serious?" Jacob asked, his voice soft but full of disbelief. He had to ask, just to be sure. Jessica nodded, a gentle smile on her face. "Why not?" she said. "Life's too short to spend it sitting alone in a corner." Jacob hesitated, his heart racing. He had every reason to refuse, every excuse to stay in his comfortable solitude, but something inside him stirred, something that hadn't been there for a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward breaking the walls he had built around himself. He slowly wheeled his chair closer to her, his fingers gripping the arms of the chair as he did. And as she took his hand, something in the air shifted. The room around them seemed to fade away, and for the first time in years, Jacob felt alive. This wasn't just a dance. It was a moment of human connection, something he had long been denied. They didn't need to say much. The music played softly in the background, and for those few minutes, they shared something that neither of them had expected. A simple act, a small moment, but one that would change both of their lives forever. Would this be the beginning of something beautiful? Could a single question, "Will you dance with me?" truly have the power to change everything? Stay tuned, because the story is only just beginning. A week had passed since that unexpected moment at the bar, and Jacob couldn't stop thinking about Jessica. Her smile, her warmth, the way she had looked at him not as the man in the wheelchair or the billionaire, but just as a person, it had left an imprint on him. But despite the connection they shared that night, Jacob couldn't bring himself to reach out. He told himself it was just a fluke, that he was being foolish to think it could be something more. After all, what would a woman like Jessica want with someone like him? But as the days went by, he found himself wishing for another chance, wishing to know her better. He had tried to bury the thought, telling himself it was just a fleeting attraction, but his mind kept wandering back to her. Meanwhile, Jessica had her own reasons for remembering that night. Life hadn't gotten easier. Every day was a struggle. As a single mother, she juggled work, taking care of her daughter, and trying to keep everything together. The diner job barely paid enough to cover the bills, and the thought of her daughter growing up without the things she deserved weighed heavily on her. Despite her exhaustion, that night in the bar had been a brief escape. She had seen Jacob sitting there, lost in thought, and something in her felt compelled to reach out. It was just a simple offer to dance, but for a moment, she felt like she was doing something that mattered, like she could make a difference in someone's life, even if just for a few minutes. The moment Jacob had accepted her offer, she felt like she was making a connection with him. The world around them had faded, and for those brief seconds, it was just the two of them. But the night ended quickly, with Jacob retreating into his world of wealth and isolation, and Jessica back to her reality of constant struggle. Still, she couldn't help but think about him, about how kind he had seemed, how different from the person she expected. And despite all the uncertainty, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were meant to cross again. The next week, as she was volunteering at a local soup kitchen, she saw him again. Jacob walked in with a business suit, looking out of place in the humble setting. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine, while Jessica was in her usual work clothes, worn out from the day. Her heart skipped a beat when their eyes met across the room. She couldn't believe it. What was he doing here? And why now, after all this time? Before she could stop herself, she walked up to him. "Jacob?" she asked, her voice tentative but curious. Jacob turned, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. "Jessica? I didn't expect to see you here." She laughed softly, trying to keep the situation light. "I could say the same thing about you. What brings a billionaire like you to a soup kitchen?" Jacob hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Maybe I needed a reminder that not everyone lives the way I do. I've been thinking about you, Jessica." Her heart skipped. She wasn't sure what to say. "Me? Why?" I don't know," Jacob admitted, his voice soft. "That night when you asked me to dance, it made me realize something. I've been so focused on my work, my empire, that I've forgotten what it's like to just live, to connect with someone. And you reminded me of that." Jessica was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to open up like this. The man she had seen as just another wealthy, lonely figure was now standing in front of her, vulnerable and real. It was a side of him she hadn't imagined, but it felt genuine. "I didn't mean to," she began, but Jacob cut her off. "You didn't have to. You did more than you know. You made me see things differently." He paused, looking around the soup kitchen, then back at her. "I want to help, not just with money, but with something real, if you'll let me." Jessica wasn't sure what to make of this offer. She had seen it all before, wealthy people wanting to help, but only out of guilt or some hidden agenda. But Jacob seemed different. The sincerity in his voice made her want to believe him. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her tone cautious but open. "I don't know yet," Jacob said with a shrug. "But I want to find out. I want to be a part of something that actually matters. And I think that something could be here, with you." There was a long pause, and Jessica could feel her doubts rising. It was too soon, too much to process. But at the same time, something in her felt drawn to him, to the possibility of what could come from this. "I'm not looking for anything complicated," Jessica said finally, her voice steady. "But if you really want to help, then just be here, be present. That's all I ask." Jacob nodded, his eyes sincere. "I can do that." And with that simple agreement, their paths began to align again. It wasn't about wealth or status anymore. It was about connection, real, human connection. They both knew their journey together had just begun. Jacob had made the decision to follow through on his promise. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a businessman or a millionaire. He felt like a person ready to do something that actually mattered. He had spent the next few days working alongside Jessica at the soup kitchen, helping serve meals to the community. The work was humble, yet it felt fulfilling in ways his luxury cars, penthouse, and corporate meetings never had. Jessica noticed the change in him. At first, Jacob had seemed out of place, a man so accustomed to wealth and status, struggling to adapt to the simplicity of the soup kitchen's routine. But with each passing day, he grew more comfortable. The awkwardness began to fade, and what was left was a quiet sincerity. Jacob wasn't just helping because he could, he was helping because he wanted to. His eyes had softened, and he listened, really listened, to the stories of the people who came through. Jessica had her doubts, of course. She had seen people with money come and go, promising help and leaving once they felt like they had done enough. But with Jacob it felt different. There was no grand gesture, no attempt to make his contribution a spectacle. It was just him, doing the work without expecting anything in return. But then, as fate would have it, one evening after they had finished cleaning up, Jacob approached Jessica with something on his mind. "Jessica," he began, his voice low, "there's something I've been thinking about. I've been helping out here for a few days, but I realize I don't really know anything about you. I know about your work here, but not much about you as a person." She smiled at him, though there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. "I guess there's not much to know. I'm just a single mom doing the best I can." Jacob nodded, his gaze steady. "I don't think you give yourself enough credit. You're doing more than that. You're making a real difference." Jessica shook her head, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm just trying to keep my daughter safe and give her the life she deserves. But sometimes, it feels like I'm drowning. Like no matter how hard I work, it's never enough." Jacob took a step closer, his eyes filled with empathy. "You're not alone in this, Jessica. You don't have to carry it all by yourself." She hesitated, looking away for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "I don't know how to accept help. I've been on my own for so long, I'm not sure how to let anyone in." Jacob understood. It wasn't easy to trust, especially when life had taught you to rely only on yourself. He respected her strength, but he also knew that there was more to life than doing everything alone. "Maybe you don't have to do it alone anymore," he said gently. "Maybe I can help. Not just with the soup kitchen, but in other ways too. I want to make sure you have the opportunity to get the help you deserve." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She had heard promises like this before, but something in Jacob's voice made her stop and listen. It wasn't about the money he had, or the influence he wielded. It was the sincerity that was there, the willingness to be a part of something meaningful. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, overwhelmed. "You're offering so much, and I don't even know how to take it." "You don't have to say anything right now," Jacob replied. "I just want you to know that I'm here. If you need anything, I'm not going anywhere." It was a simple promise, but in that moment, it meant the world to Jessica. She had been so used to struggling on her own, that the idea of someone being there for her, truly being there, was almost too much to take in. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "You don't know what this means to me." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their conversation hanging between them. It wasn't the grand, dramatic gesture that might have come from someone else, but it was something real. And that, in itself, felt like the beginning of something worth holding on to. The next few weeks passed by quickly. Jacob continued to volunteer at the soup kitchen, but their bond grew beyond that. He visited Jessica and her daughter at their small apartment, bringing them groceries, helping her with repairs around the house, and most importantly, spending time with them. Jessica's daughter, Lily, was shy at first, but Jacob's easygoing nature won her over, and soon they were laughing and playing games together. Through all this, Jessica found herself softening. She had spent so long shutting people out, believing that she was the only one who could protect her family. But Jacob had shown her something different. He had shown her that there was strength in letting someone else help, in sharing the load instead of carrying it alone. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie with Lily, Jacob turned to Jessica. "You know, I've been thinking. I've been a part of this world of wealth and power for so long, but it never felt like this. Like this, what we have, it feels real, and it's something I never expected to find." Jessica looked at him, a soft smile spreading across her face. "You've made me believe in that too," she said quietly. "That there's more to life than just surviving. That maybe, just maybe, I don't have to do it all on my own." Jacob reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You don't," he said with certainty. "You never have to." And for the first time in a long time, Jessica believed him. The journey they had begun together wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The weeks passed by, and Jessica started to feel a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Jacob's presence had become a steady anchor in her life. What had started as an unexpected act of kindness had evolved into something deeper, a partnership, a connection that neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish. But as with any relationship, things weren't always smooth. Life had a way of testing them, of throwing obstacles in their path. And the first real test came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Jacob had invited Jessica to a charity gala that he was hosting. It wasn't a big event, but it was an important one. The evening was meant to raise funds for the community programs they had both been working on: soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and outreach programs for single mothers like Jessica. For Jacob, it was just another night of networking, but for Jessica, it was a world she was still getting used to. The glitter, the elegance, the wealth, it was all a little overwhelming. When Jessica arrived at the venue, Jacob was already there, greeting people and shaking hands. She stood at the back, feeling out of place in the sea of suits and gowns. She had never been part of this world, and the fancy surroundings made her feel small despite the designer dress she wore. She glanced around, looking for Jacob, but his figure was swallowed by the crowd. That's when it happened. A voice, smooth and confident, broke through the noise. "Jessica? Is that you?" She turned to see Jacob's business partner, a tall, elegant woman with a cold smile. Julia, a woman who seemed to glide through rooms with effortless grace, was one of the main players in the business world Jacob had built. Jessica had met her only once, but something about Julia always felt off, like she didn't belong in this world of genuine kindness that Jacob had tried to show her. "I didn't know you'd be attending," Julia said, her tone dripping with mock politeness. "I must say, I'm surprised. I didn't expect someone like you to be in the same circles as Jacob." Jessica's stomach tightened. She didn't know what Julia meant by someone like you, but she could feel the judgment behind it. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a smile. "I'm here to support the cause," Jessica said, trying to keep her voice steady. Julia raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "Of course," she said, clearly not convinced. "I'm sure you're doing more than just supporting the cause. I've heard Jacob's been spending quite a lot of time with you. How interesting." Jessica felt the weight of her words, the subtle insinuation that Jacob's kindness had motives behind it. She had seen this side of the world before, the part where people judged others for their choices, assuming that kindness was only ever about getting something in return. But Jessica wasn't so sure about that with Jacob. She had seen how he acted, how he genuinely cared, and she wasn't going to let anyone make her doubt that. Before she could respond, a hand appeared on her shoulder. She turned to see Jacob standing behind her, his expression unreadable. "Julia, please excuse us," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Jessica and I have plans for the evening. I'll catch up with you later." Julia opened her mouth to protest, but Jacob gave her a look that made her stop. With a tight-lipped smile, Julia turned and walked away, leaving the two of them alone. "Are you okay?" Jacob asked softly, his hand still on her shoulder. Jessica nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I don't know. It's just this world. It's so different from what I'm used to. And Julia, she doesn't make it any easier." Jacob's eyes softened, and he gently turned her to face him. "You don't need to worry about her, or anyone else here. I invited you because I want you here, because you matter to me. And if anyone has a problem with that, it's their issue, not ours." His words were like a balm to her nerves. In that moment, Jessica realized that the uncertainty she felt wasn't about the people around her, but about her own self-doubt. She had spent so long thinking she didn't belong in places like this, that she hadn't seen how much Jacob genuinely wanted her by his side. Not because she was some charity case, but because she was someone he valued. "I just don't want to make things awkward," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want people to think I'm only here because of you." Jacob smiled, taking her hand in his. "You're not here because of me. You're here because you're part of this now. You've been part of it since the moment we started working together. And you deserve to be here just as much as anyone." For the first time, Jessica truly believed him. She wasn't some outsider looking in. She was part of this world, this life that Jacob had introduced her to. And no matter how different it seemed, it was hers to navigate now. The night went on, and as the gala continued, Jessica found herself enjoying the evening more than she had expected. She spoke to people who were genuinely interested in the work they were doing. People who saw her not as the woman who had a difficult past, but as someone who was making a difference. Jacob was by her side the whole time, his hand never far from hers, offering quiet support whenever she needed it. By the end of the evening, as the last guests trickled out and the lights dimmed, Jacob led her to a quiet corner of the venue. He looked at her with a smile, his eyes full of warmth. "Tonight was perfect," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I'm so glad you were here with me." Jessica smiled back, her heart full. "Me too. Thank you for everything." Jacob kissed her gently on the forehead. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice low and full of promise. And in that moment, Jessica knew that everything had changed. She was no longer just a woman trying to survive. She was part of something bigger, and for the first time she didn't feel alone. The weeks following the gala felt like a dream to Jessica. She was still getting used to the changes in her life. Her connection with Jacob had deepened, and their relationship had grown more comfortable. They continued to work together on their community projects, and Jessica's life, though still challenging, felt richer with purpose. Jacob had kept his promise. He was there for her, truly there, in ways she hadn't expected. One afternoon, as Jessica walked to her car after a long day at the soup kitchen, her phone buzzed with a message from Jacob. It was simple, just a few words. "Can you meet me at the park in 30 minutes? I need to talk to you about something important." Jessica felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. Jacob had always been clear and direct, but something about the message made her wonder. What was so important that he needed to talk about it now? She drove to the park, her thoughts racing. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft glow over the trees and grass. She spotted Jacob by the fountain, standing alone, his posture tense. He looked up as she approached, and his expression immediately gave away that something was weighing on him. "Hey," Jessica greeted him softly, trying to gauge his mood. "What's going on?" Jacob took a deep breath, his hands in his pockets. "I've been thinking about something. About us, and about where things are heading." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She had been wondering the same thing. What did the future hold for them? Could their relationship survive the differences in their worlds? She tried to steady her nerves, unsure of what Jacob would say next. "I've been thinking a lot about how I've changed since I met you," Jacob continued, his voice calm but serious. "And how much I've learned from you. From your strength, your ability to balance everything with such grace. But I also realize that this isn't just about us. It's about your future, too." Jessica frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Jacob hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've seen how hard you work. You're doing everything you can for Lily, for the community. But I also know that you've sacrificed so much of yourself to make it work. You've been so focused on surviving that I don't think you've had a chance to think about what you truly want. And I want to help with that." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure where this conversation was headed, but she had a feeling it was a big step for both of them. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jacob stepped closer, his eyes softening. "What I'm saying is that I want to give you the chance to focus on yourself, to not have to worry about everything all the time. I've been talking to some people, and I can help you with a scholarship for Lily's education. And I want to help you with a business venture you've always dreamed of. You have so much potential, Jessica, and I don't want you to feel like you have to carry all of this alone anymore." Jessica felt a rush of emotions hit her all at once. She had never imagined someone like Jacob would want to help her in such a profound way. But it wasn't just the help he was offering. It was the recognition, the validation of her dreams and efforts. Jacob saw her, truly saw her, in a way that no one had before. "I don't know what to say," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "This is so much. I don't want to owe you anything." Jacob reached out, gently taking her hand. "You don't owe me anything. This is about you. I want to see you thrive, Jessica. I want to see you become everything you've always dreamed of." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. For so long, she had kept her dreams tucked away, afraid to reach for anything more than survival. But now, with Jacob's support, she realized that maybe she could have both the love she never expected and the future she always deserved. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, her hand tightening around his. "I never thought this kind of life was possible for me." Jacob smiled softly, his thumb brushing over her hand. "You don't need to thank me. You've earned it. And if you're willing, I'd love to help you build that future. Together." In that moment, Jessica realized that the walls she had built around herself were beginning to fall. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to live, to dream, and most importantly, to trust that the love and support she had been given was real. And as they stood together in the park, the last of the sunlight fading behind them, Jessica knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next, but this time, she wouldn't have to face them alone. The following days felt brighter for both of them. Jessica had started to believe again in hope, in love, and in the possibility of a future where she was no longer trapped by her past. With Jacob's support, she began sketching plans for a small community cafe. She had always dreamed of a warm, welcoming space where single parents and struggling families could come together, share meals, and rebuild their lives. Jacob helped her connect with the right people and even offered to invest in the project, but Jessica insisted on being an equal partner. She wanted this dream to be something she built with her own strength, not just a gift she received. Jacob admired that about her, her integrity, her determination. It was one of the many reasons he had fallen for her. But beneath all the new beginnings, Jacob carried a quiet fear, a fear he hadn't voiced to anyone. His injury, the one that had confined him to the wheelchair, had started to worsen. The doctors had warned him about potential complications, but he had ignored the signs for too long. Now, the pain was back, sharp and unrelenting. He hid it well, not wanting to worry Jessica, but the strain was growing harder to conceal. One evening, as they were closing up the soup kitchen, Jessica noticed Jacob's hand trembling slightly as he tried to lock the door. "Jacob," she said softly, "are you okay?" He forced a smile, shaking his head. "Just a long day. I am fine." But Jessica wasn't convinced. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing in concern. "You are not fine. You are pale, and you are shaking. What is going on?" Jacob hesitated, but the exhaustion in his face gave him away. "It is nothing serious," he said quietly. "Just pain. It happens sometimes." Her heart sank. "You should have told me," she said, her voice full of worry. "You do not have to hide things from me." Jacob looked at her, his expression soft but tired. "I did not want you to see me like this. I did not want you to think I am weak." Jessica shook her head, reaching for his hand. "Weak? Jacob, you have been through more than most people could handle. The only weakness is pretending that you are okay when you are not. Let me be here for you, the way you have been here for me." Her words broke something inside him, not in a painful way, but in a healing one. He had spent years building walls around his vulnerability, believing that strength meant never showing pain. But Jessica's compassion cut through those walls effortlessly. "I do not deserve you," he whispered. Jessica smiled through her tears. "You deserve someone who cares enough to stay, and I am not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, Jacob began treatment again, with Jessica by his side every step of the way. She went with him to every appointment, made sure he ate well, and reminded him to rest when his stubbornness got the best of him. Her presence made the days feel lighter, the nights less lonely. And as he recovered, Jacob realized something profound. The woman he had once thought he was saving had become the one saving him. One night, as they sat together on his balcony overlooking the city, Jacob turned to her and said, "You know, I used to think that being strong meant standing alone, but now I understand that real strength is letting someone hold you when you cannot stand anymore." Jessica smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you have done the same for me," she said softly. "You reminded me that I still deserve happiness." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the city lights, neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. Their silence was full of understanding, two souls who had found strength, healing, and love in each other. For Jacob, it was no longer about what he had lost, but what he had gained. And for Jessica, it was no longer about survival, but about finally living. As the months passed, Jacob and Jessica continued to build something beautiful together. The CAF project was moving forward, and Jessica could see her dream starting to take shape. Jacob remained by her side, offering support and guidance whenever she needed it, but always careful to let her take the lead. It wasn't just about the CAF anymore. It was about their shared vision, their belief in each other, and the life they were slowly creating together. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and the next challenge came sooner than either of them expected. It was an ordinary morning when Jacob received a call that would change everything. He had been to the doctor for a routine checkup just a few days earlier, and today, the news he had been dreading finally arrived. The doctor's voice on the other end was calm, but the words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Jacob, it's time we have a serious conversation," the doctor said. "The condition is progressing faster than we anticipated. We need to start considering more aggressive treatment options." Jacob listened in a daze, nodding occasionally, but it felt like the world around him was spinning out of control. The pain had been manageable until now, but it was getting worse. The wheelchair, once a tool that allowed him to maintain some independence, was becoming a daily reminder of his limitations. And now, with the doctor's words weighing heavily on him, he felt like he was losing the fight. He hung up the phone, his hands shaking, and stared out the window. He had always prided himself on his ability to control everything in his life. But now, for the first time, he felt completely helpless. When Jessica came home later that evening, she found him sitting on the balcony, staring out at the city with a distant look in his eyes. The moment she walked in, she knew something was wrong. Jacob's usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by an uncertainty that was impossible to ignore. "Jacob?" she asked gently, walking over to him. "What's going on?" He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and fear. "The doctor called," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The condition is getting worse. I don't know what to do anymore." Jessica's heart sank. She had seen Jacob struggle with his pain, but this was different. She could hear the fear in his voice, the same fear that she had seen in herself countless times. The fear of losing control, of losing the life they had built together. Without saying a word, she sat beside him, wrapping her arm around his shoulders. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into her, resting his head against hers. In that moment, all the words they could have said seemed unnecessary. They were in this together, and that was enough. "You don't have to do this alone," Jessica said softly, her voice steady despite the emotions rising within her. "We're in this together. Whatever comes, we face it together." Jacob looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "I've always been the one helping others, the one in control. But this is different. I'm scared, Jessica." "I know," she whispered. "But you've never been alone. Not really, and you're not alone now." Jacob felt something shift inside him. The weight of the world had always been on his shoulders, but in Jessica's arms he realized that he didn't have to carry it alone. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they had each other, and that was enough. As the days turned into weeks, they took things one step at a time. Jacob started the more aggressive treatments, and though it was difficult, he never once felt like he was facing it alone. Jessica was there every step of the way, helping him stay strong, reminding him of the strength he didn't always see in himself. Through it all, they found a new rhythm. Jacob, despite his fears, began to let go of his need to control everything. He allowed himself to lean on Jessica, to accept help, and to trust that together they could face whatever challenges came their way. And as for Jessica, she had never felt more certain of her place in the world. She had been through so much in her life, but now, with Jacob by her side, she felt like she could conquer anything. One evening, as they sat together, watching the sunset from the balcony, Jacob turned to Jessica and took her hand. "I don't know what the future holds," he said quietly, "but I do know one thing. I am grateful for every moment I have with you." Jessica smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I'm grateful for you, for everything you've taught me about love, about strength, and about never giving up." They sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, Jacob's health remained a constant concern, but it wasn't the only thing on his mind. The community CAF project was thriving, and Jessica's dream was taking shape more beautifully than she had imagined. The once quiet, modest space was slowly transforming into a lively center for the community. It wasn't just a CAF. It was becoming a symbol of hope, a place where people could connect, share, and find comfort in each other. Jacob watched as Jessica's passion for the project grew, and he couldn't help but admire the strength she continued to show. But despite the progress, Jacob couldn't ignore the tension in the air. His condition was still worsening, and the physical toll it was taking on him was becoming harder to hide. He had learned to push through the pain for the sake of their shared goals, but deep down, he knew he couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the clinic, Jacob found himself sitting in the living room, his mind racing. He had promised Jessica that he would be there for her, that he would support her and the CAF, but he couldn't escape the feeling that he was becoming a burden. He had never been one to ask for help, but now, every step he took felt heavier, every breath harder to take. Jessica walked in, her face lighting up when she saw him, but that smile quickly faded when she noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. She knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked softly, her voice filled with concern. He looked at her, his eyes full of guilt. "I'm not okay, Jessica," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to be strong for you, but I can't do it anymore. I'm afraid that I'm going to let you down." Jessica's heart clenched at the raw vulnerability in his words. She sat down beside him, taking his hand in hers. "You're not letting me down," she said firmly, her voice full of reassurance. "You've never let me down. You've been my rock, my support, through everything. But you don't have to carry it all by yourself." Jacob shook his head, his frustration clear. "I don't want to be a burden to you. I don't want you to look at me and see someone who needs saving." Jessica cupped his face gently, her eyes locked on his. "You're not a burden to me, Jacob. You're the man I love. And love isn't about perfection or carrying the weight of the world on your own. It's about being there for each other no matter what." Tears welled up in Jacob's eyes as he looked at her. He had spent so much of his life feeling like he needed to have everything under control, to be the one who helped others. But now, in this moment, he realized that real strength came from allowing himself to lean on someone else, someone who truly cared. "I don't know how to let go," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. Jessica smiled softly, her thumb gently brushing away a tear from his cheek. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. We'll take it one day at a time, together." In that moment, Jacob finally allowed himself to feel the weight he had been carrying all these years. He wasn't alone anymore, and that was enough. The days that followed were full of change, not just in Jacob's physical health, but in their relationship. Jacob began to accept help when he needed it. He leaned on Jessica, not as someone weaker, but as a partner. Their bond grew deeper, stronger, and more resilient with each passing day. And Jessica, in turn, found herself letting go of her fears of being overwhelmed. Together, they created a life built on mutual trust, love, and understanding. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Jacob turned to Jessica. He took her hand in his voice soft but full of certainty. "I don't know what the future holds, Jessica," he said, his gaze never leaving hers, "but I do know one thing. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to live, to love, or to be vulnerable, because with you, I'm not alone." Jessica smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "And I'm not afraid either. With you, I'm home." They leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle but full of promise. And in that moment, they both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, neither of them was afraid. They had each other, and that was all they needed. As the months went by, the cafe continued to flourish. It was more than just a business to Jessica and Jacob. It had become a testament to their journey together. What started as a simple dream in Jessica's heart was now a thriving community space, full of life and warmth. People came from all walks of life, seeking a place to relax, share stories, and find comfort in a world that often felt too busy and cold. Jacob had never imagined he would find himself in a place like this, not just as an investor, but as a partner, fully invested in something that mattered. Despite the ongoing challenges with his health, he was more present than ever. He had learned to let go of the control he once clung to and had embraced the joy of building something meaningful alongside Jessica. One late afternoon, as they were cleaning up after a busy day, Jessica looked at Jacob, her heart full. The cafe was quieter now, the last customers had left, and the sunlight was beginning to fade. She walked over to him, her eyes sparkling. "You know," she said softly, "this place wouldn't be the same without you. It's not just about the money or the resources. It's about you being here, helping me, every step of the way." Jacob smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "We built this together, Jessica. You've always been the heart of it. I just wanted to be by your side, to make sure your dream didn't just stay a dream." They stood in the middle of the cafe, surrounded by the soft hum of the evening and the scent of freshly brewed coffee still lingering in the air. The world outside seemed distant, and in this small, quiet space, everything felt right. "I'm proud of you," Jacob said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've taught me so much about love, about what it really means to care for someone. I don't think I ever truly understood it until I met you." Jessica's eyes softened, and she reached out, taking his hand. "You've shown me that I don't have to do everything on my own, that I can trust, I can let go, and I can love without fear." Jacob pulled her into an embrace, holding her close. He knew their journey together wasn't over, that there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. They had built something beautiful together, something real, and with Jessica by his side, he knew they could face anything that came their way. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the future seemed brighter than ever. There was no more fear, no more doubt. They had found what they were looking for: love, support, and the strength to move forward together. Jessica looked up at Jacob, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think this is just the beginning. Yenjame." Jacob smiled, his heart full. "I know, and I can't wait to see what comes next." Together, they had created a life that was more than they ever imagined, and they knew that as long as they had each other, they could take on whatever the future held. Their journey was far from over, but one thing was certain: they would face it hand in hand, with love, courage, and hope in their hearts.